Still recording? Okay, now we're recording. Recording, cool. Goodie bag, goodie. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jared. I'm an atheist, and this morning I went to a Baptist church. And they gave me this beautiful mug made in China. To be fair, a lot of churches give out mugs to new visitors, but this has got to be the highest quality insulated mug I've ever been given. Thanks, guys. I went to Summit Church this morning.
It's more of an interactive version.
And I'm gonna cut to the chase, 2 out of 5. This was a very weird church experience. Now, that's kind of saying a lot because I've been to a lot of churches, and for a lot of people, this will be the type of church that they have the most experience with because this is what is drawing the highest number of people right now. This is a multi-campus church founded by J.D. Greer, who is one of the former presidents of the Southern Baptist Convention.
First Baptist or Southern Baptist?
Now, when people think Southern Baptist, for a long time they thought old, stiff, super traditional, and that characterization is really outdated. This is the new Baptist church. I swear, they have to have like an entire squadron of police cars out here to direct traffic. You pull into the parking lot, and if you're a visitor, you're supposed to put your forward blinkers on so that somebody can come out to the car and greet you when you park. You get out of the car, they hand you a pamphlet, they walk you over to a tent, they get your name, your email address, your phone number, and then they walk you inside and tell you a little bit about the church. This whole phenomenon of multi-campus churches is a very new, very bizarre phenomenon in modern Christianity to me. So the setup is that the pastor stands on stage, he is recorded via video, and then he's Skyped in to all these other congregations. And I'm going to apologize in advance if you go here. I'm sure there's a lot of devout Christians here. I'm sure there's a lot of devout people who go here to worship. But the overall experience is so canned and staged that it just feels soulless. Now, the 2 stars that I'm giving it are because the pastor's sermon was fine and because the people who ushered me into the service were very warm and welcoming. That's something I will praise them for. The guy who ushered me into the church at the beginning of the service remembered my name as I was leaving the building, and that was really nice. I was talking to one of my Eastern Orthodox friends about this phenomenon, and he said, it feels like modern churches operate by a script while bragging about how they don't operate by a script. And I think that's right. You know, just because you're Protestant or evangelical and you don't have a mass or a liturgy, you don't have a set path on how you're supposed to do things in the church, there is still very much a set way of doing things that's very hard to break out of. And it's become so polished and refined and perfected that it feels like a commodity. And not just a commodity, but a synthetic commodity. So last week I went to a Pentecostal church, very small church, probably 50 people there. Their team of musicians, while talented, they didn't sound great. Their sound system was bad, the room was echoey, it was kind of chaotic and disorganized. At one point, the pianist didn't have the sheet music for the song that they were about to play, so he gets up in the middle of the service and runs back to his chair, grabs the sheet music, and heads back to the piano. At this church, that would never happen because they've rehearsed it over and over and over again, and they've perfected it to the T. And that's good and that's admirable, you know, like, hey, give your best. But that level of like perfection and precision is kind of off-putting. And maybe this is just my Pentecostal background that I love the chaos and the spontaneity of religion, but I couldn't help but think that like there is absolutely no wiggle room with the structure of this service. You know, if the Holy Ghost starts moving and you want to play an extra song, it's like, oh, what do we do? I don't know. Do we have the infrastructure in place that's going to throw off the 30-second interval between the pastor and the next? It just feels so rigid with how it's supposed to be, and it's trying so hard to be the opposite of that. It's trying so hard to feel authentic and genuine and passionate, and it just feels contrived. And I think the hardest part about this is that it feels contrived, and that seems counterintuitive to the gospel message to me. Because the gospel message is supposed to be some sort of answer to human suffering and the human condition, and it feels like you're not allowed to talk about human suffering there. It feels like everything has to be safe and family friendly. And to me, that's verging on blasphemy, because nothing about the gospel is supposed to be safe. So case in point, part of the pastor's sermon dealt with Elijah versus the prophets of Baal. There's this famous story in the Old Testament, super cool, where Elijah has like a standoff with the prophets of Baal, this false god. And in the passage, the prophets of Baal, they're praying to their god and they're slicing their wrists as, like a blood ritual. And they're praying, Baal, please come and light this pyre of wood on fire. And nothing happens. And Elijah starts mocking them and he says, oh, what's your God doing? Is he like on a vacation? Is he taking a shit? What's going on? And the pastor has to sanitize it because there's kids in the congregation and you can't actually say the word shit. So you have to say, and Elijah was making fun of them. And he was saying, is your God taking a potty break? My point is, I think this whole phenomenon is weird. It's very weird and very counterintuitive. That a religion that is based on a blood sacrifice, a human blood sacrifice, has become this safe, homogenous, suburban utopia for white Americans. Like if John the Baptist were to walk into that church, people would lose their damn minds. And the Baptists are very good at caring about numbers, which feels very capitalistic. And I'm not one to throw around the word capitalism very often, but I'm going to make an exception this time. There's a lot of bragging about, oh, we had this many baptisms this month, we had this many salvations this past year. But I don't think that they're keeping track of the opposite statistics. What is the average time span that a person will attend this church? How many people will deconvert before the age of 25? I have a lot of pastor friends, and some of them have asked me, why do young people leave the church? Why do they leave religion? And there's a lot of answers to that question. But one of the reasons that I suspect people who deconvert from this congregation would give is that Christianity just doesn't feel relevant to the real world. Now, pastors, when they hear relevant, they think, oh gosh, we need to be a bigger spectacle. We need to have more fog machines and lasers. But I think it's the Christian inability to talk about suffering that makes it feel so shallow. Like, I suspect that a lot of these young kids who are in this church now, when they go off to college, they're going to drop religion in favor of social justice. Like, you're in your freshman sociology class and you learned that your iPhone contains cobalt that was mined by slaves in the Congo, and it's like, oh, wow, that feels a lot more real than anything that I ever learned in church. And yeah, there were nice people there, and maybe they were even doing good for the community, but they don't have a comprehensive grasp on what the hell is going on with this world and what's wrong with it. They have a simplistic understanding of the human condition, a simplistic answer to what is going to make things better, and the solutions that they propose don't demand anything of me, which is great for suburbia. It's great if you're trying to settle down. It's great if you want a break from the chaos of life, but it's not great for the gospel. It's not great for Christianity. So a couple of big problems with this church. One, there's a lot of people there. And if you're not careful, you'll be led to believe that, oh wow, God is doing big things in our community. No, you're just stealing congregants from other churches. Like, well over 90% of these people are not people who, heard the gospel at this church and got saved at this church. They were taken from the local Presbyterian church and the local Lutheran church and the local Assemblies of God church. And they were brought into this new hub. And that's most of what modern churches are doing. It's like corporations going to war against each other. So it's this church on one corner, Destiny City on another corner, and Elevation Church down the road, and all three of them are fighting for territory. It's literally turf wars with believers being the end goal. The other problem that I see with this church is a general trend among a lot of big churches, and that is satellite campuses. I think that this is stupid, and I think that it's dangerous because you have one pastor for 12 congregations. Now, granted, I think this church is doing a good job of setting up a board of elders and deacons and other pastors to facilitate a general sense of accountability to the main pastor. But the fact of the matter is, this entire congregation, this entire shindig is built on one dude who is fallible, one dude who is just as likely to slip up and stumble and cheat on his wife or embezzle church funds as anyone else. And if this dude slips and falls, he's not just taking one congregation with him, he's taking 12 congregations with him. And then you have another Mark Driscoll scenario. And then before you know it, there's a fucking Netflix documentary made about you and your church. And what is the reason for that? Why does there have to be one pastor across 12 different campuses? Is nobody else that competent that they can preach such good sermons? Is nobody else that educated that they don't have PhDs in theology? What is the reason why there has to be one guy who is over this entire flock? And it just feels like it's all because it's a corporation rather than a church. It's not concerned with, building the kingdom of Christ, whatever congregation it happens to reside in. It's about building Summit Church. It's about building this congregation, and so that we can expand our outreach and we can have a better Q4. And it's crazy to me. It's fucking crazy to me. So I don't know, man. I don't know what my solution for this church is. My recommendation would be that you need to diversify your interests. And by interests, I mean pastors. You got campus pastors at all 12 of these congregations who are not allowed to speak. I mean, they speak, but it's like, it's an exception rather than the rule when a campus pastor is leading the sermon rather than the sermon being ported in from the main campus with J.D. Greer on it. Yeah, I wish I had more memes to give about this one, but this one actually kind of low-key upset me. So yeah, sorry. My name's Jared. I'm an atheist. Go to church or whatever.